Hi everyone, my name is Veda and I'm a business manager at Madiff. Welcome to our second episode of Madiff Talks. If this is your first time at our page, Madiff is a unicorn developer, and Madiff Talks is our special space to bring tech leaders, product people, and innovators in general to discuss the hottest topics in tech with us. After this episode, please make sure that you visit our social media and check our first episode with Simon from Platform E. Some last week or 2 weeks ago, I think he joined us for a debate about sustainability in the fashion industry. And thankfully for today, we have an equally interesting episode with a new series called Go Global. And we really much hope to shine a light on the topic and help other companies taking better decisions when going internationally. So for today's conversation, we invited Antonio.
Hi, Vera. Good afternoon.
Hi, Antonio. How are you?
Doing well. Hope you're doing well too.
Yes, I'm great. Thank you for asking. And thank you for joining us for this conversation today. Just to give people at home an idea, Antonio has one of the best records when it comes to international projects. I've told you this a couple of times before. Antonio has been developing projects for 5 different continents, 17 countries, and 36 cities. Right?
Yeah, that's about
Okay.
right.
Okay, that's great. I think that before we jump into our conversation, I wanted you to give us an idea of what you do, of course, and how you fit such an international background in what you do.
Sure. So I started working in 2008 during an international SAP implementation and a worldwide implementation. So I was lucky enough to join a team that was just starting that big implementation project. I specialized in logistics execution and warehouse management. As you said, Vera, I worked in 5 continents, 17 countries, 36 cities in full life cycle rollout and upgrade projects. Currently, I'm working as a product manager in the warehouse stream, let's say, and working also on a big digital transformation project.
Okay, it sounds already big by your short description. And before we explore a little bit the technical part of your work with SAP, I am sure that within this international experience, you for sure have some interesting stories. I know because we've discussed a couple of them, but why not bring them to our conversation and to people at home as well?
Sure. To light things up, I'll share one that is, I think, okay to be viewed by everyone and heard by everyone. It's a simple one. When I started working in these worldwide implementations, I wasn't home very often, so I wasn't very often in Porto. And once I was, I rarely passed by the office. And usually, when I did, was to drop off some expenses and leave to another city on the next Monday or Sunday. In one of these occasions, I was confronted by a bunch of colleagues on a Saturday morning when I entered the office, thinking nobody was going to be there. And when I was leaving, a lot of people blocked the entrance because they weren't sure who I was. And apparently, somebody had tried to get into the office that week to try and steal some computers. So they weren't sure if I was there to steal something too. Once I identified myself, even with my badge number, they quickly were okay to let me go again.
And I can tell people at home that like this story, Antonio has hundreds and hundreds of good stories, and we could do just a matter of talks about these stories. But a little bit related to our topic for today, international, going international, and this is an actually interesting topic, and I was hoping that you could give us your take on some aspects. We know that usually companies are more concerned with core aspects of bringing a business internationally, right? Because businesses don't exist in a vacuum, so they are really influenced by policies, by inflation rates for currency exchange, and especially here in Portugal, I think you can probably agree. Portugal is becoming more and more attractive when it comes to attract foreign companies because we do have some perks when it comes to taxes. But then there's the culture side of the thing, and on that aspect, I am really sure you can bring us your take. What do you think are the most important aspects that these tech companies should take into consideration when they want to bring their business to another site?
So, from the experience, or for what I've experienced in the past, what I see is setting company values, and that doesn't mean they need to be set in stone. We live now in a world where everything changes very quickly. So, again, the word that comes to mind is always agile, that everybody's talking about all the time. So, the organization needs to be built with a certain structure that can also sustain that kind of change if needed. And again, in the case I've worked with, when we first won one of our first global clients, where we needed to build a support team for them, we needed to adapt the team to the customer's needs. So if it's a global client, we needed to have around the sun support, meaning we would start in APAC and then finish in NOAM, having a couple of hours overlap to pass the work between the team members, so that we would make sure then when the user turned on his computer or her computer in APAC the next morning, the things or the probability of her issue or his issue to be solved was higher because somebody had picked it up and passed the ball around until it was finished. And of course, this can only happen if we have continuous team training. And then you have, of course, all the company culture that needs to be set on those values, with not only with the training, the how should I say, the again the cultural awareness of working with different kind of with different kind of personalities, cultures, the way we work in the team has to be consistent and harmonious, so that
Mhm.
even though we all came from different backgrounds, we are respecting the same values, and the goal is always to satisfy our customer so we can keep them around for longer and longer.
Mhm. I think that's interesting because you started answering the topic with the idea of first you need to set a structure on how you're going to do this. But even when you do feel a check mark on these aspects that you mentioned, you can still face some tensions, like you were saying, because you're dealing with different personalities, and you can indeed face some miscommunication problems coming from these cultural differences that you were saying as well. So in your opinion, how do you think you can take the best advantages from this cultural diversity in general?
Again, that's as the example we took is always having a clear communication within the team members and within the whole company structure. And by this, we also have to have definition of keywords, because there's a long list of terms that are either industry terms or whatever tech terms we might use, that some companies might be using it with a different meaning. And if we all use the same words for the same meaning, the communication is clear. If every time somebody says a word, everybody else is thinking of a different meaning, it's going to just complicate the conversation and the communication. And that doesn't help to build any trust. And without any trust, you won't build a team or the team culture that you need to make sure your business thrives.
Hmm. Okay. I think I got it. I think I would also want to have like an idea of how this fits within the specific tech space that you're working with. Just to remind people at home, Antonio works with SAP, more specifically with logistic models, and of course we wouldn't miss the chance to dig a little bit into your technical expertise. And from now on, since we are diving in a field that is not properly my field of studies, please feel free to correct me whenever something is wrong. But specifically in your case, when you operate with a supply chain that spans national borders, it can be probably a bigger challenge itself, right? So with SAP for logistics, for warehouse management, even though it's a great tool, it can sometimes be quite overwhelming because it has limitless options and modules. So, usually in your tech space, how do you usually plan an implementation, for example, on an international scale?
So our structure always passes by handing out like a questionnaire to try and gather some information that are the early requirements. on the type of processes that are used to try and identify any gaps that we might see, thinking on the solutions we already have out of the box to deliver. And of course, with this, before starting any of this, the project scope has to be set. If it's a, world, a company-wide SAP implementation, there's some structures there, for example, in logistics that depend on each other. So we cannot concentrate in silos to make sure I'm just going to take care of my part and that's it. You need to make sure that your part is communicating with whoever is coming before and after you. So everything is intertwined and everything is end to end. And to make that work, I encourage always on-site visits. On-site visits give you the opportunity to build some empathy with the business people you're working, be it the warehouse manager or the operator in production or the person who works in transportation and contacts the carriers who are going to pick up the stock, the material to be shipped. Every little pace you can set up here and be and know these clogs of the big machine is always useful. And for that, you will have an image of how their infrastructure works. With that, you can help define where might they need printers, where might they need Wi-Fi for computers or RF guns or anything else. But then the biggest challenge of all that I've seen in all the newly acquisitions and companies that we install SAP in is always the change management. People are used to a certain software, and it's always fearful or concern to change to a new software. And having the opportunity to support the business with basic user training or key user training, making sure we test side by side, that we show the people, see, this is what we have discussed, this is how it looks in the system, so that there's no expectation management that might be failing, and that we deliver what the goods that the customer was counting on. And again, for this, on-site support is very much encouraged. Of course, there are some streams where we can work off-site, as people are very used to working with computers and working remotely, but they are in the execution streams, manufacturing, warehousing, plant maintenance, and everything. You need to be on site to get to know the physical location.
So, like you're saying, a lot of your work is also done on the side of managing fear, managing concerns, do the training to new key users, um, and probably just guide them through this change management, like this change in terms of software, right?
Correct. That change is, again, I understand the concern, but I don't think it has to be something to fear of.
Hmm.
We're always evolving. There's always little changes we do every day that we don't even take notice. And this is just one more thing that, if people get to know the reason why this change is happening or what the benefits will be, I think it's easier to have should I say it, that next step, the accepting the next step, than being in constant denial and thinking, oh, it's only next month, or that's in 6 months, I don't have to start learning now. Then when they do, it's in a week we are going live, you need to know everything we've been teaching you in the next in the last 2 months. Do you remember everything? And people usually don't. So that's why we always present documentation. We encourage them to take as much notes as they want. That's why we print the documentation, not only send by email, to make sure they take their own personalized notes so they remember the issues they had. And especially when I give out training, I do it with as many mistakes that I know they're going to commit as possible. For example, if they're receiving something, I might not tell them everything they're receiving, just so they, when they're receiving it, how should I wait? And then they have the questions, which I'm expecting, and that's okay. Now you see, so because if they're not thinking, they're just doing automatically whatever it is, that's not the actual user training. That's not them accepting the solution if they didn't understand what's going on.
Hmm. Okay. I do understand your last point, and I think that's a very interesting way um, of you managing the way they are learning how to adapt to a new environment. Um, Also, another topic that I wanted to introduce to my discussion with you, it's a little bit more on the side of the recession that we're feeling a little bit here and there, which I also think is related to this fear, this sense of fear that you just introduced us to.
Mhm.
Um, I in on my side of the work, I do notice that some companies are already in survival mode. Like let's say, and even if they wanted to expand internationally, I believe that's probably not on the forefront of their agenda at the moment. But do you have any type of advice on how these companies can still have having an international business on their agenda, but still grow in a sustainable way?
So what we've witnessed during the pandemic is was the Great Resignation, as a lot of the media called it, where a lot of people were stuck at home and finally realized they were not happy doing what they were doing. So a lot of people quit their jobs and went to fish or catch a new job that they were more interested. Some newly companies were created, and of course, the success of those companies that were created depends on the consistency of keeping the company alive. And again, I think this the resignation changed the employer employee relationship a lot, as a lot of people demanded certain things they didn't used to have in their work, like the opportunity to work remotely from home. This is something now becoming the norm, as a lot of companies, when they have a LinkedIn offer, they always say it's hybrid, and they specify you can work 2 days from home or you can do 3 days at home, whatever. But they usually are providing that as a now it's a workplace fundamental. And in our case, in the company I've worked with the customers I've worked with, as they were mainly um, foreign customers, we were already allowed to work outside the office most of the time. So remote work was a norm 15 years ago for us, and it's now becoming the norm. This is great because it gives the employees a new sense of work-life balance, which is much needed to a lot of people, of course. And again, with the recession, and you're saying a lot of companies are in survival mode. We see big tech companies like Google firing 6% of their workforce, and others following through. I'm curious to see if the recession now might bring some balance to this great resignation that happened a few years ago, or if we keep seeing that happening and companies having to adapt to that.
Mhm. So just to wrap it up and see if I could really understand. So you think that perhaps starting to create a remote team in another site before you're able to officially settle your entity and start building your offices and a strong activity in that site could be a good and potential option to these companies, right?
Yes, I do think that remote work is. I wouldn't say it's the future, because it's already here. So it's not the future. It's
And in your
one way
area,
to go.
it is way before COVID, way before
Exactly.
COVID.
My area is way before COVID. So 15 years ago, we had already started with this. We
Yeah.
were already working for foreign customers, and we were working remotely from Portugal to them, which is very normal and custom to do here. The only surprise here with companies might wanting to get bigger, by working remotely, you also have to a different to you have access to a different pool of talents that you didn't have if you're just working locally. So having the possibility to grow global, and to go international and work with many other countries and entities, it might facilitate your growth possibilities in your company, if you're willing to work with a lot of people that might be working remotely. But that all
Mhm.
depends on the flexibility of the organization, of course.
Of course, and be willing to work with remote teams and have all the necessary control to keep the machine ongoing, and of course, be ready to face all of the fears that we mentioned throughout our conversation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Antonio, it has been a great conversation. We are almost at the end. Before we end, I just wanted to know from your side, as a curiosity, if you watched the first episode we had with Simão.
Yes, I did. I recently did.
That was not planned. That was not planned. So you probably know what's coming to you as well. Um, like you probably noticed, we are planning to finish all of our episodes with a $1 million question. Um, Please understand this is supposed to be a free space to our innovators to contribute with their ideas without any type of limits. So we wanted to know from your side, Antonio, if you had limitless resources, what type of technological advancement would you create in order to make SAP a more useful tool to warehouses worldwide?
So, in the specific work of logistics and warehouses, I think it would be the compatibility of external warehouses, or so third-party partners that we work at different granularities, and that meaning details.
Mhm.
Most of the external warehouses, you can make an order and say, okay, our carrier will be passing through your warehouse, and we will need so much material of whatever the lot or batch and kilogram amount you give them. But having to identify a specific box when they have, I don't know, 30 pallets and there's also 100 boxes in a pallet is impossible. But sometimes, because it's a specific batch, because it's a specific printed bottle, whatever the case might be, that granularity might be necessary. At the moment, we face a lot of difficulties because most of the external partners work with different warehouse management systems. They don't provide that type of granularity. They might have it on the pallet, but that's it. They don't go on the specific box or the specific bottle, which might be inside the box that is also on top of a pallet. So the
Mhm.
granularity there on different levels you might have uh, is complex. I think this might be an opportunity to change, because not having to have a big warehouse with the prices of the real estate going higher and higher, I think business might be able to spare some money and invest it some other way by not having these big buildings that they sometimes have to fill as the ideal warehouse for anywhere. Any company would be always the smallest possible. That way you don't have to have a big building, you don't have to have a lot of people working your warehouse. Ideally you would produce and ship directly to the customer all the time. As that is not possible due to different type of materials, to the material availability date, to products that are seasonal, whatever the case might be, having a partner with a big warehouse you could use is always better. And the tools that sometimes are presented by the warehouse management systems are not always 100% compatible to SAP solutions. If they are, they might be at different granularity levels, and that's sometimes complicated and tricky to work because of the how should I say, not a dependency, but of a custom that the customer is already used to certain level of service, and they might want the same type of granularity, and they don't need to know if your stock is coming from an external warehouse or from your own warehouse, as long as they know you produced it. So that's where I would spend my money on working on this slight change.
And do you think, just as a curiosity now, do you think we are too far from seeing that more commonly applied, or do you feel there's already some companies giving some first steps in that direction?
I know there's already companies working on this direction. I know there's already SAP implementations that have this with external warehouse management. It all depends on the granularity that each customer wants to a take here. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to work on this soon. And I think again, sparing the having to manage big buildings might be a big opportunity. And again, it also gives someone else the business that they already have a big building and might need the business of having it occupied, having the work for their workers. They might have a lot of customers that already use there, or few customers in certain zones. So it depends.
Antonio, in that case, please let me know if you start working on something along those lines so we can find a way to document it, because I think it would be really interesting to see you taking part on such project. Um, I wanted to thank you for joining me for this conversation today. Um, just for people at home, we will leave this conversation, this episode, in our social media for people who would still want to jump on a short conversation with Antonio just to make some stuff clear. I'm sure he wouldn't mind joining you for a virtual coffee and make those questions clear for you. And make sure to visit our site, check this episode, check the first ones, and also stay tuned because we are already preparing new episodes for this same series and for new series as well. Thank you once again for joining us, and I hope you keep having a nice day.
Thank you. See you later, Vera. Bye.
Bye, Daniel.